This week, we've seen another big spat of outflows when it comes to crypto investment products. In total, I think the number this week was 1.7 billion, fifth consecutive week of outflows. Considering kind of what you've seen in past cycles, you've been through this before, you've kind of seen how these things go. I mean, what's your expectation?
Here's the thing that people need to understand. We've went from digital assets be considering an asset class. Instead of digital assets, they're now being considered national assets, right? We have a stockpile where the government is going to hold these other crypto tokens, and we're going to aggressively pursue the acquisition of Bitcoin. I mean, you just couldn't be any more bullish than that. They had a crypto council, a crypto czar. It really is just unbelievable when you start thinking about it.
Today's episode is brought to you by Stacks. Bitcoin's trillion-dollar potential is untapped. Stacks unlocks it. Convert BTC to SBTC and earn up to 5% APY in Bitcoin. No custodians, just trustless DeFi. Your Bitcoin working harder. Bet on Bitcoin's future now. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Coinage. I'm your host, Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City as we are watching crypto perhaps stabilize a little bit after what has been a pretty ugly start to 2025. But right now, things looking okay-ish as Bitcoin steadies around that $85,000 level, a little bit below it right now. But a lot going on and a lot happening down in D.C. in the world of crypto and politics. So we got a hell of a show planned for you today. Not only going to be chatting with Eleanor Terrett as she launches her new show in just a bit, but very excited to kick things off today with a man who went to battle in Massachusetts. And of course, had already gone to battle before that for the holders of Ripple in the case against the SEC. Excited to have on, honored to have on today, John Deaton, former Massachusetts candidate for Senate. John, thank you so much for coming on, man. Good to chat.
Hey, it's great to see you again, Zach. It's been a while, brother.
It has been a long time, and obviously haven't seen you since what played out in Massachusetts. I haven't seen you since we got a lot to talk about in the SEC versus Ripple case. So excited to be chatting with you today. I guess I just want to start with kind of what you make of where we're at as we're seeing crypto down a little bit. The SEC changes that are happening. You put so much energy into that race, and it was kind of like a focal point for anti-crypto army versus John Deaton and everyone else. And so what do you kind of make of how different the landscape looks now?
Well, I think that the anti-crypto army lost. We can officially say that. I mean, let's step back, Zach. Two years ago, 2.5 years ago, if we would have said, write down the most bullish case you could think of, what the industry probably would have wanted is like a government to take their boot off the neck of the industry, give us the rules of the road, and be neutral. But we've got a lot different than that. We've got a president of the United States who has said they're going to make America the crypto capital of the world. We have an executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve with also, which isn't just HODLing the 200,000 Bitcoin that America has, but actually saying to the the Secretary of Treasury, who is a Bitcoiner, and the Secretary of Commerce, who is a Bitcoiner and also involved with Tether, I want you to find budget neutral ways to acquire Bitcoin. You would have never imagined that in a million years. And so I think it's official that the anti-crypto army of Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler, are done.
Yeah, no, and I think there's a lot of people that are excited to finally see that, just kind of considering all the shenanigans that played out in terms of, trying to undercut this industry. And really, I think, as you've championed, John, kind of undercut retail traders who are out there kind of trying to find a new system that works for them. I think there's also still, though, kind of this weird, phase right now where all of this is playing out. Obviously, a lot of changes happening in D.C. And one of the questions I wanted to pose to you was around kind of what we're seeing. Ripple's been on a tear since the election, and that's one thing. And I think it's kind of interesting because obviously would love to get your take on kind of the SEC versus Ripple case as it exists now. But weirdly, I feel like Ripple's borne the brunt of kind of the downside when the SEC was going after them. But if they win, it kind of spills over to the rest of altcoins. And so I think it's kind of interesting to think about that in terms of the excitement and upswing in Ripple, maybe not being shared by the rest of kind of cryptos beyond Bitcoin and ETH. I mean, what do you make of that case, where we're at now, and what it says about the rest of the crypto space?
Yeah, it just shows you what a difference a couple years in an election can make. I mean, I think that we've seen the SEC officially dismiss the Coinbase case, the Kraken case. We've seen them end investigations against not dozens, but hundreds of companies that got Wells notices, Gemini, Robinhood, big names in the industry. The SEC is, folded their tent and said, we're done. Go innovate, and we're taking that boot off your neck. And so a lot of people have been expecting, especially in the XRP community, well, why hasn't the SEC v. Ripple case completely resolved? Everybody's got to understand it was a little different, right? There was an actual ruling by a judge who ruled early sales of XRP, needed to be registered, and gave an injunction saying you can't sell like that anymore, direct sales, but secondary sales are okay. So there's a lot of finagling legally of how to remove that. There's been lots of reports, and maybe Eleanor, who's coming on in a little bit, will have more insight on her sources. But, there's a lot of talk that SEC and Ripple are close to coming up with a resolution that is going to end all of that litigation. And I think we're seeing what happens when you get a level playing field and innovation has an opportunity to breathe. And so I know a lot of people are upset, Zach, or maybe not upset, but impatient about price action, and why isn't Bitcoin over 100,000, and why haven't the altcoins moved the way that they were expected to? Maybe I think that's all going to play out, but there could be never a more bullish time, in my opinion, for this industry. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm telling you, as someone who has 84% of his net worth in the asset class, obviously I'm pretty bullish.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm up there with you in terms of, I don't know, I got to look at things now depending on where prices are, what that percentage looks like. But regardless, I'm, kind of in the same camp. And I think that that's kind of one of the things that is interesting to kind of consider here. I think we have the CoinShares chart because, we track inflows, outflows. And one of the big things, obviously, since the Bitcoin ETFs got approved damn, time flies. It's been, longer than a year now that we've seen those trading. But this week, we've seen another big thing of a big spat of outflows when it comes to crypto investment products. In total, I think the number this week was 1.7 billion, fifth consecutive week of outflows. And so I'm kind of curious, John, in terms of your case, right? Obviously, long term, I think you and I are both in the same camp that this is still, an asset class definitely worth holding. But considering kind of what you've seen in past cycles, you've been through this before, you've kind of seen how these things go. I mean, what's your expectation? There's so much going on in DC right now around the stablecoin bill, market infrastructure. I mean, how do you see this shaping out in the short term?
Well, listen, let's just back up. We have an executive order that says acquire Bitcoin for budget neutral ways. Zach, there are so many ways to be budget neutral. That just means that we can't issue debt and print dollars to buy Bitcoin as far as the United States government. But, you could come up with federal payments. You can general contractors paying to contracts partly get paid in Bitcoin, and you put a little bit into the strategic reserve. Obviously, you could sell other assets. You could issue bonds. I mean, there's just dozens and dozens of ways that you could do that. And then you couple that with Larry Fink of BlackRock, 11 trillion under management, saying that, all people in their portfolio should have 1 to at least 5%, in Bitcoin or other crypto assets. And so, I think we've learned that the crypto industry, especially retail, are impatient, but there just couldn't be a more bullish case. And when we get stablecoin legislation, which looks like it's going to happen fairly quick, and then you get the market structures bill, which is going to basically say, okay, here's what a digital security token is. Here's what a digital commodity is. Here's what an exchange or other type of tokens are. That's going to be great news. And Hopefully, we're going to also get some consumer protection issues like centralized exchanges, making sure that bills, that if there's a bankruptcy, if Coinbase were to go bankrupt, customer
Hmm.
funds, are protected and not subject to the bankruptcy court and the creditors of the centralized exchange. So there's lots of things that are going to happen. Uh, I think we're just seeing a shakeout. I think it's the typical with the macro issues, the tariffs and other things happening. I think there's just a suppression, but I'm someone who believes that we're going to see a significant increase in the market by the end of the year,
Yeah, I
especially
mean,
when quantitative easing goes down. Interest rates are going to get cut maybe 3 times this year. That's going to be explosive liquidity coming back.
yeah, I mean, there's a big. I guess most of the people are right now expecting the Fed decision this week, which we can dig into in a little bit. Most of the people expecting steady as she goes for the time being, but we'll see what plays out for the rest of the year. But you mentioned Tim Scott and the stablecoin bill. I just want to play a little clip of what he said just a couple weeks ago because it's kind of rare to see. It's the Genius Act, it's the stablecoin bill. It's getting so much attention and. It's been something that even Maxine Waters and Chair Patrick McHenry tried to get done under the last administration, didn't go anywhere. And so just want to play a little bit of what he said about how much of a priority it has become in D.C. Take a listen to what Tim Scott said not too long ago.
My theory is the first 100 days of a new administration is important. On the Senate side, my goal is to be as aggressive as possible to achieve an objective of having bills through the Senate in 100 days.
So first 100 days, I mean, we're getting close-ish, but I mean, the idea of pushing the stablecoin bill through there is going to be big. And I guess just backing up too, John, in terms of everything you learned by running as a politician up in Massachusetts, going head-to-head with Elizabeth Warren, taking on the anti-crypto army. How big of a night and day shift is it, really, when you kind of like try and explain it to people that you've got an AI and crypto czar standing up there next to the head of the Senate Banking Committee now, and Tim Scott saying, look, in the first 100 days, we're trying to get this through, and actually doing it?
I think it's what happened in the Senate tells you everything you need to know. Elizabeth Warren, as you know, Zach, was trying to file these amendments to the Genius Act, and she got shot down and got shot down. And the other issue of exigency, and I'm someone who's been talking about this, it's kind of hard to believe, but a year from now, Zach, it's going to be full midterm election campaign seasoning. And then the midterms come in, and we know that historically speaking, the party that's in power sometimes loses one of the whether it's the House or the Senate. And so I think there's a sense of exigency just in case the midterms don't go the administration's way and the House might flip. Well, we need to get this done. And I think that's what you're seeing. And I think it's great news. This is going to drive here's the thing that people need to understand. We've went from digital assets be considering an asset class. Instead of digital assets, they're now being considered national assets, right? We have a stockpile where the government is going to hold these other crypto tokens, and we're going to aggressively pursue the acquisition of Bitcoin. You have Senator Loomis's bill wanting to acquire 1 million Bitcoin in 5 years. I mean, you just couldn't be any more bullish than that. They had a crypto council, a crypto czar. It really is just unbelievable when you start thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you too personally, because obviously I haven't chatted with you since I saw you on the campaign trail before the race. I wanted to ask about your reflection since, obviously, I think, I don't even know. We didn't even get a chance to talk about it, but I didn't know if you thought, going into that the goal was to win because Elizabeth Warren is entrenched in Massachusetts. It's just kind of like she's been there forever. So you chose the hardest battle you could have. But clearly, I mean, what's been the takeaway for you, John, as you reflect on that race, the idea of kind of at least moving the Overton window where it kind of was, again, the anti-crypto army was her thing. What do you make of everything you put out there? And by the way, congratulations on actually doing it, because you don't see it that often, someone who's not in politics, getting into it, running a race the way you did. So just first off, my hat's off to you for doing it. But what's been your reflection since, John?
Thanks, Zach. Listen, a lot of people don't realize this is how crazy Massachusetts is. Technically, realistically, I got my butt kicked, right? She beat me by 20 points, but I was the first Republican in over a couple decades to get 40%. I was the except for Larry Hogan, I was the most best performing non-incumbent senatorial candidate for the entire 2024 election. So there's lots of things that, as a first time candidate, underfunded, going against someone like her, you got to look at certain victories. But listen, I announced February 20th, which is extremely late. It gave me 7 months to try to put a campaign, but no one was stepping up to go up against her. She was gaslighting America. She was literally going to try to just completely crush this industry. She was pushing for a Federal Reserve issued central bank digital currency. George Orwell was spinning in his grave. And so I basically just said, you know what, I'll probably lose, but I'm going to give it my best effort. And I think the fact that, I at least got 40% shows you an undercurrent. President Trump, even though Massachusetts, he loses in 2020, he lost it. It was the largest loss of the election. Massachusetts was the second most improved state in the country. So there's an undercurrent here in Massachusetts where I think they're tired of this lack of common sense. And so there's reasons to be proud. I'm proud of what I ran. It was great to stand before her, in front of her. I got to call her corrupt to her face. I got to tell her that her and everyone else in Congress sucks on national television. So it was interesting. I'm very glad that I did it.
Yeah, no, as I said, I think, in terms of running a campaign at a time when it was needed, because the alternative is she just runs unchallenged, I guess, and, steady as she goes, and that's the way it goes. And so, is again, taking a stand. And I watched the debate. It was fun to watch. And I live tweeted it. It was, I think, well done. And I think I speak for the entire crypto space when we say, hey, well done out there on the front lines, John Deaton doing his thing. Also, today's a very interesting show because we have a friend of yours, friend of Coinage. She hasn't been able to come on in a while, but excited. It's been a while. But Eleanor Terrett is back on Coinage with us today, the new host of Crypto in America on here. And Ellie, I think this is the first time we've had you on since you had your big announcement. We got John Deaton here. We got you here. It's a family affair now. Congrats, first of all, and thank you for joining us. Don't know if you have anything else to add here in terms of what we're discussing, because you've been covering not just John Deaton's battle in Massachusetts, but really everything that's been going on in D.C. What do you make of kind of where we find ourselves now as all of these changes are happening very fast?
Well, thank you so much, Zach, and good to see you, John. It's great to be back on. I think it's been more than a year since I was on Coinage, Zach, so very excited to be back and in my new role as co-host of Crypto in America, which is going to be airing its first episode on Wednesday morning. And I also have a newsletter coming out along with that. The first launch of that was this morning. And then you've also got a Wednesday and a Friday newsletter to look forward to from me, too. So, all right, shameless plug over. I will, yes, I will add to what you guys were saying. I mean, I heard John say, it is incredible to see how far we've come in the last, year. Yes. I mean, I think the big changes really started when we got the Wall Street ETFs, right? When we got the Bitcoin ETFs. And Zach, you said, I can't believe that was more than a year ago now, but January of 2024, that was sort of the shift that we saw, the institutional investors coming in, Wall Street, Larry Fink started loving on Bitcoin. It was quite something to see. And then you started hearing from Donald Trump, right? You started hearing crypto, vote Donald Trump, vote crypto, I'm your guy. And all of a sudden it's the crypto, they're taking up the crypto calls in Washington, D.C. It was something. And then the momentum from there was quite incredible to watch as well. We had Donald Trump at the Bitcoin Nashville, the Bitcoin Vegas is this coming one, Bitcoin Nashville last summer. And then all those donations as well. Crypto industry really rallied together to, through Fair Shake, through those other super PACs to make their mark on Washington and to create the most pro crypto Congress ever. And I think that's what we've seen, right? That momentum, you played that soundbite from Tim Scott. You said, it's a priority of mine to get this done, within the first 100 days. I think President Trump has now extended that deadline. You heard him say at the White House Crypto Summit, extended that deadline to at least before August recess. He'd like to see a market structure bill and a stablecoin bill on his desk for signing. So that momentum really picked up, and it's just been an incredible change. I mean, I started covering the space, John, as you know, at the end of 2021, and that was sort of the end of the last bull run. Kind of coming into that year prior to the collapse of FTX, and that was peak Gensler, right? Peak Gensler at the SEC, and we could not have had a bigger change from what we had then to what there is now. So it's really been exciting
Yeah.
to see and to cover from a journalistic perspective.
Yeah, no, it's a massive change. And John, I think to Eleanor's point there, I think, again, you're coming in first 100 days, you're juggling a lot, clearly, obviously. I would assume crypto slips down somewhat, and yet it still hasn't. I mean, we just saw the White House summit. Ellie, you were down there. It's like the crypto summit is being hosted despite everything else that's happening on the global stage of politics. It's like you can't say that it's not a priority. But when you kind of like think about what to expect next, John, I mean, putting all the pieces together, is there something that you're watching where it's like, this is the next thing that I think people might be missing?
Well, listen, I think that just let's evaluate something real quick, right? Howard Lutnick, before he was Commerce Secretary, discloses that he has hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin, that he expects it to be billions of dollars in Bitcoin. He also has Cantor Fitzgerald basically holds all of the reserves of Tether, and Cantor Fitzgerald owns up to 5% of Tether. He becomes Commerce Secretary. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is out there before becoming Treasury Secretary talking about what an amazing asset Bitcoin is. They now become the Treasury and Secretary Commerce Secretaries, and they're directed by the President of the United States to find budget-neutral ways to acquire Bitcoin. I don't know. I said this is probably the most asymmetrical trade. I'm not saying it has to be an investment of a lifetime that I'll see in my life. When you put those facts together, I think we're going to see that you're going to. I didn't believe it at first when Anthony Scaramucci said that he thought that the government would buy 500,000 Bitcoin. I was like, that's not going to happen. Come on. And now I'm starting to think that might actually happen, and that's just going to explode. As far as altcoins go, you're seeing all these ETFs for XRP, for Solana, for AVAX. All of those Avalanche. When I say AVAX, I'm hypering it, but it's just you're going to see an explosion, in my opinion. Now, you got to be understand there's a lot of volatility and risk, but I couldn't be more bullish, and I think we're going to.
I think the competition aspect does get a little interesting. I'd be curious to get both your guys' take on that because, John, as you mentioned, Tether and the stablecoin bill, it does seem like Circle and Tether are kind of going at it, and you've got kind of the Lutnick spicy piece of it in terms of Cantor Fitzgerald's attachment to Tether. But you basically got, from what I saw, Jeremy Allaire at Circle coming out and being like, hey, if you're going to be a stablecoin issuer, you got to be based in the U.S. Obviously, Tether's based down in El Salvador. And so that opens up a very interesting political battle that's going to be playing out for two of the largest stablecoins. And I don't know, as a politician, John, or former politician candidate, however you want to label yourself, by the way, we should have asked about that before we started the show, is like, what does John Deaton want us to call him? I mean, what are your take about that? Because these laws are getting written and the lobbying has increased so much. I mean, how do you see that piece playing out?
Yeah, listen, when I saw that Ripple, basically created the RLUSD, Ripple Labs USD stable coin, to me, that was a big deal because I thought XRP originally started off as though it was going to be sort of like a stable coin. That sent a message to me that stable coins are going to be where it's at. What I mean by that is that it's projected at just 500 billion, at eventually 3 trillion type of market cap just with stable coins. And so I think you're seeing that play out. Interesting that Circle had an advertisement basically throwing Tether under the bus. So I think we're going to see it play out, but it's good news for the asset class. Everyone's talking about price, but I think that at this point, you're seeing real people. You're seeing people like Larry Fink talking about several $100,000 price targets in the next couple of years for Bitcoin. And I think when you take the major caps, altcoins like XRP, Solana, Ethereum, they're all going to do well, in my opinion.
Well, Eleanor, I mean, you were just down in D.C. I don't know. It looked like when we were covering it live, it looked like they ushered media outside the room, but I know you have sources who stayed through the whole thing. I mean, what do you make of kind of that push over this 100 days and where things are at when it comes to both the stablecoin bill, market infrastructure, and just the idea of a room like that? As I think most of the people said, it was like insane to think about you'd have a room like that at the White House just like a few months ago.
No, it was pretty amazing to witness. And as someone who was there in person, as you mentioned, we were only there for about, I'd say maybe 15 minutes, but then that was after Trump was talking about the FIFA World Cup. So we had that whole thing in there. I think a lot of the industry was a bit confused by that, but you know what? It's kind of cool to see the cup in person. But when we finally got to the substance of the speech, it was pretty clear that Trump still is, past his candidacy now, President Trump is still prioritizing this space as something he wants to see thrive and something that he kind of wants to put his name to as well. You saw that with the Trump meme coin the day after the inauguration or the day of the inauguration, and the obviously the World Liberty FI, his family getting involved in crypto too. So, I think, you can, that's very Trump. If you know Trump, that's, sort of his signature, right? He wants to be sort of in the conversation. He wants to put his stamp on things. So we're seeing that play out in real time. And I think the cool thing about the crypto summit was, I think a lot of people were hoping it would be live streamed, the live stream conversation of actually what was going down at the roundtable. But folks I spoke to were happy that it was more of a private meeting, because the format really was kind of going around that horseshoe, right? We saw, I'm not sure like how the cameras were were set up for the live stream, but if you were in the room, I was kind of on the left hand side. It was a big horseshoe of about 30 CEOs and founders, and then obviously you had the top table with Trump and Lutnick and Bo Hines and David Sachs. But it was very much sort of a go around the table and just tell us about things that you want us to learn, to understand. Like, how do you feel? What's on your mind? Just get it all out there and lay it on the table. And I was told that David Sachs and Tom Emmer were taking notes, for most of it, kind of jotting down people's, takes on things. Michael Saylor, I was told, went on for about 10 minutes, outlining his digital asset policy framework that he's made public a couple times. So I think again, to your point about it being just a complete 180, it was also really cool to see, it all in action at the White House, and Trump being there, and the FIFA World Cup, as I said, that was a nice little touch. So interesting times, always.
I respected the pitch to be like, hey, we might want to do a coin, and I have a room full of everyone in crypto, and so I'm going to mention as the FIFA guy here that we might want to do a coin around the World Cup, and just slam that in there. It was nice. It was very well done, I think, well executed. John, I know that we only had you for like 30 minutes today, so I know you got to run, but I'd love to have you back, man. This is great. And thank you so much for coming on, Coinage. And again, thank you so much for what you've done on the political campaign side. And congrats again. Would love to have you back.
Man.
And thanks for coming
Oh,
on.
I love to be back. It's always great talking to you. Ellie, congratulations on your new adventure, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, John. Good to see you.
John Deaton there, former candidate from Massachusetts, coming on Coinage. Great thoughts there. And Eleanor, I turn back to you on your big announcement as you move on to start this thing. First off, as John said, congrats on crypto in America. I think a lot of people are excited to have you. I mean, you already were, let's be honest, focused 100% on crypto. But now doing it yourself. I mean, what led into the big change, the idea to jump from Fox Biz into doing this? What was the thought process?
Well, the thought process was pretty much just the feeling that I had been covering this space, sort of as a side job, to be perfectly honest. I mean, you know this, Zach, but I'm not sure if a lot of your followers, my followers, are aware of this. My title at Fox Business was producer for Charlie Gasparino, who, was an incredible boss, an incredible mentor to me. He really taught me the ins and outs of old school journalism and how to be a really good reporter and do it the way that it's supposed to be done. Don't jump to conclusions too quickly. Always be super invested in your sources, build great source relationships, and just do the legwork. I think a lot of the new media today is kind of obsessed with the fact to get the story the quickest, right, but not necessarily get the facts straight. And I pride myself on doing those things, and I can thank Charlie for that. But in the last 4 years of working with him, I really started getting into this crypto reporting side gig and just enjoyed reporting on the space, enjoyed, meeting industry players, meeting people like yourself in crypto media. And I just sort of felt like I found my place. And I realized I wasn't going to continue at Fox Business, in that same vein. I wasn't going to be the I wasn't going to be playing the role that I wanted to play there. So I figured, what better time than to go out and do this new media thing, quote unquote new media, right now when crypto really is a part of the conversation both on Wall Street and now more importantly in Washington D.C. So I
Hmm.
thought there could be no better time than now. And so yeah, super excited about it. The podcast is, obviously it's going to be sort of the linchpin of the project, and then we have the newsletter as well. But I'm also hoping to roll out my own sort of branded content maybe later this year to kind of continue my brand was sort of built on like breaking news and breaking scoops. And it's always the media landscape, the crypto media landscape for sure is always, the news cycle never stops. So a weekly podcast is excellent, but also, I need to keep everybody up to date and involved and,
Yeah.
and informed on what's going on. So we'll see. I have a few thoughts there, but more to come on that front, Zach.
No, I mean it is hard. I mean, obviously, again, very similar in terms of the path, and I think jumping from traditional media into crypto media, obviously, for what my experience has been, it has been cool to see more of the traditional finance players wake up and enter crypto, but at the same time, it's kind of like, well, damn, I left that world behind, and now crypto is moving this way, and it's like, okay, back
Right.
in TradFi coverage area.
It
Um,
moves quickly, and you know this too from coming from TradFi. You feel like they kind of are slow, right? They're slow on the uptake, and then when they finally realize, it's like, okay, now we're like 2 years into this.
Yes, and I mean, I
What was
guess
the
it does.
holdup?
It is a different. I'd be curious to get your take too, in terms of like the difference of who you now need to deal with in terms of crypto. I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously, this in terms of Coinage being a community-owned outlet and kind of our model in terms of you can mint an NFT and co-own us as a legal cooperative. We paid out the first distribution to our NFT holders last year, making history there. But I think it's kind of interesting because you deal with an audience that is so different in crypto. And Elliot, coming from Fox Biz, I'm sure you kind of had the same experience where it's like the audience that you have on Twitter is probably very different than the Fox Business readers. And so it's like, how do you square those things? How do you explain one thing to one audience, still appear genuine to one, and then go to the other? I think you were tweeting the other day about a user by the name of Lucky Tits, I believe was that user's name. Perfect example to show. Uh,
Oh
and
boy.
and there's just like there are crazy people out there who say some crazy things. But I'm curious if like since you've launched this, I think the other thing I saw in discussion was like you said you don't own crypto, so it's like people were talking about like can you own crypto and cover crypto? I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of this audience, the Web3 audience that you've now ingrained yourself with? If there's any
Mhm.
like huge wake up call relative to like the old audience you served.
Well, I liked what I was doing at Fox Business in the sense that I was covering crypto and writing about it for a Fox Business audience. So I kind of was able to cover it from a more macro, high level perspective, which, as someone who is not super in the weeds in the technical terms in crypto, that's not really my forte. That's why I like the policy side of things. That's why I like the legal side. I felt like at Fox Business, I was able to sort of amplify that because our audience was not super tech savvy. Um, I think I'm continuing that now with the sort of the policy angle on crypto in America, kind of leading with that. But I think there's obviously a big difference. And you mentioned the notion that I don't invest in crypto. I think it's it's important for me to separate that because you see the comments on X. The second you write something that somebody doesn't like, all of a sudden it means that you're trying to pump your own bags and you're trying to you're trying to lose somebody else money. I feel like crypto being so volatile, Bitcoin maybe a different story, but some of these altcoins are just so volatile that they can move on, a news report or something that comes out on crypto Twitter. And I never want to be responsible for that. I never want to be, my reporting may move the market, but I never want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to, I never want to be accused of, oh, well, you benefited financially from that. So for me, it just kind of it it makes me feel more comfortable to kind of separate myself from that, and I can always cover it in a more objective way. that way.
I think it's interesting because, like, again, there's a lot of different ways to go in that, and certainly, I mean, we've been accused. I think any journalist ever who publishes something probably is going to get accused at some point of being biased one way or the other. That's just the way that this goes.
Right.
I think that, in terms of what we've tried to do, it's like, all right, there's no getting around that. So how do you kind of defend it? And so that's why I think, like, we landed on our idea of a community-owned media model. And to your point, it is terrifying to throw yourself into the arena and be like, okay, we're going to try something like this. And same thing in terms of this week, we're trying another experiment as well, as we put out our own little experiment of tokenizing this new play button we got behind me, in terms of the YouTube play button as the first Web3 media outlet to win one of those bad boys as we crossed 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's been a fun thing. It's been a fun thing to try. And so we're tokenizing it. We're throwing it out there. Is there a chance that I then get accused of, if price goes down, that we just kind of like did something bad? Yes, that's always going to be there. But I think unless you throw yourself in an experiment, you're just never going to know. And so it's been fun to do that. It's been fun to launch that, and we'll see what happens. But I am curious to get a sneak peek.
I was gonna say, congrats on the 100,000 subscribers. That's quite a milestone.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's been fun, and like the only reason we're doing this is because it could sit here statically in the studio behind me, or we can tokenize it and see what happens that way. And so it's an experiment again.
Why not make it fun?
Trying to, but Eleanor, that's what I want to ask you about Crypto in America, because you're co-hosting it with, I believe, the general counsel from Say, as well as Jackie Melnick, who came from TechCrunch, now doing her own thing as well. So this trend of traditional media people shifting into independent media continues. What should people expect on the actual show itself? The topics you're going to dig into, as you said, everyone should check it out in terms of what you got coming out this week, kicking it off, and subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't already. But what are people going to be getting out of Crypto in America?
Well, think policy, very policy driven. We're going to be talking to the biggest players crafting crypto policy in Washington, D.C. We have a special first guest coming out on the Wednesday episode. I'm not going to give away any hints, but it is someone who is key right now in crafting crypto policy at the higher echelons of Washington, D.C. So stay tuned for that. But what we really want to dig into is just really how the sauce is made in Washington, D.C., right? There's a lot of crypto podcasts out there that kind of go into, what crypto trades are good, what meme coins I should buy, when is altcoin season, when's the next bull cycle. But we realized there was a gap in the market for the policy side of things. And now that it really is a main focus for, most crypto investors, it's not just crypto companies, right? It's obviously they want to get some rules of the road. They've been asking for this for many years now. We want some clarity to be able to, operate fairly and feel like we're not getting, persecuted for just existing. I think it's also important for the investor to know, what companies that they are, interacting with, investing with, using on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's for everybody, companies, investors. It's the conversation of the moment, and we want to bring those players sort of closer to home. Ask them the questions that the audience wants us to ask. The audience is curious about, but also have a little bit of fun as well. We do a rapid fire round to end the episode. So we do some kind of fun questions. So these people that maybe seem a little bit inaccessible to our audience, maybe, the David Saxes of the world, we can kind of go in there and say, hey, David, who's your favorite character from fiction? And if you had to have a best friend from a movie, just fun questions like that. But I'm not saying David Sachs is our first guest on Wednesday.
That would be,
But you have to sit and wait.
Okay. little mini potential tease there. I like it. And I think in general, it's exciting to see more voices, and this. I've told you this over the years since we've gotten to know each other. I think you do great work in terms of, I think, again, people just kind of want information. They just want to know what the hell's going on. And as far as journalists go, that's generally the vibe, is helping people understand information as we get it, reporting it, and again, doing it in a way that is accurate, which is sometimes the hardest thing to do, as simple as it all sounds. But I'm excited because now, you're doing your own thing, and now you can come back on Coinage, which is exciting because we haven't been able to do this in forever. There is one other aspect about it too. I mean, the idea of, I think I saw your guys' Crypto America account getting suspended, and I think it's like a flavor of like, all the anti-crypto sentiment. Like, I don't know if you've tried posting on LinkedIn about this announcement either, but it is kind of crazy to think, despite everything we just talked about around like DC coming around to crypto and the idea of wanting to build America into the crypto capital of the world, you still have accounts like this. You have issues like this on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on wherever it may be. I mean, what has been your early insights in trying to go it alone independently, Ellie, in terms of facing all that?
Well, aside from that little snafu that you're showing the audience right there, it's been pretty smooth sailing. But to your point, there's always going to be the sort of resistance from people who, are not super on board with this kind of thing, despite, the sort of blessing that we're getting from, from the politicians and from the regulators in Washington. I haven't had any issues with LinkedIn. What our theory on the X account getting suspended is that someone just doesn't like us and someone just doesn't want to see us succeed. So I'm appealing to Elon on this
Yes,
live
free
broadcast.
Ellie.
Maybe he'll be watching this. And if you are Elon, please free us before our episode launch on Wednesday morning. But um,
Well, we'll do our
it's
part to try and help and get it out there as well.
I
Because yeah,
appreciate it.
it's crazy. It's crazy to think. Like, I remember we've been doing Coinage for 3 years. The idea of when we first started, it was like you couldn't talk about crypto on these platforms. Like, it just wasn't allowed. You certainly couldn't run
Right.
ads. That wasn't allowed either. So there's like no way to really get the word out on any of this stuff. And it's crazy that like still happens.
Yeah, and we're early, right? I mean, let's say we're like a year into this sort of pro crypto policy conversations we've been having, and we're only what under 3 months into the Trump administration. So there's more to come. We're in early stages, but yeah, for now it's an interesting roller coaster to ride for sure.
Yes. Well, either way, very happy for you personally. Very excited to see what
Thank
happens and comes from crypto in America. And again, selfishly, very excited that Ellie has been freed and can come back on Coinage when she's available. But again, thank you for coming on and congrats. Excited to watch when the first episode drops. Eleanor Terrett, thank you so much and congrats.
Thank you, Zach. Talk soon.
That'll do it for this edition of Coinage.